Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now September 2nd of 2023, and given that Snow White 2024 is getting closer to its official D23 reveal for the official trailer, although we have a handful of board members that are trying to argue against others on whether or not they really want to even drop it at D23 and save it for the holiday season around Christmas time ahead of its March of 2024 release date window. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into exactly what's going on with this film, moving onwards, and exactly what Bob Iger and the board are very worried about. Now, we know that this film, without a doubt, is going to most likely be the biggest failure of all time, at least for the live action remakes as far as Disney's movies go. Now, we know that they are doubling down on all of their agendas moving forward into the future and exactly what they want to do with many of the animated classics getting transferred into live. However, one big development has a lot to do with Snow White 2024 and the overall storyline that is indeed directed by Mark Webb. You guys may know him from The Amazing Spider-Man's 1 and 2, including 500 Days of Summer. Those are basically his three big movies that he did, and not counting this one, of course. This one's going to be a very big dent in his career and what's left of it. Now, moving to the next major thing here, we know that the plot so far has been very messy for Snow White. They have a Plan A and a Plan B in the works. Plan A is to re-edit the film. Plan B is to do reshoots, which, by the way, they can't do that just yet because of the strikes. So, moving onwards, with Snow White 24 still going through many issues for Disney, one major and significant development has to do with some of the plot leaks involving Snow White that are making matters even worse for Disney behind closed doors. One specific sequence that was filmed during May of 2022 that is still part of the final cut involves Zegler's Snow White giving Andrew Burnap's Jonathan a series of demands and making an open statement about how she does not need his help. There is even a sequence in which Snow White is hanging off a cliff from the wreckage of a bridge leading to the Evil Queen's castle, where Jonathan offers help immediately trying to pull her up. This is where Snow White pushes Jonathan and his arm away and pursues to eventually rock climb up the cliffside to the surface. One shot during the second act of the film that was actually filmed back in July of 2022 involves one of the magical creatures growing a series of fruits and vegetables, followed by the other 6 magical creatures picking and choosing their food for the evening. This is where it transitions to a later point in time where they are sitting around a statue of the Evil Queen that was abandoned years ago as they follow into the Forbidden Forest. Now guys, let me just stop right here. We talked about this like a month ago, that there's going to be this Evil Queen statue in this film that is basically the entrance into the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest basically leads to the Evil Queen's castle, but along the way, there's a lot of terrors that they must face, including a lot of creatures, crows, we'll get into that in just a second, and basically, this does involve the 7 magical creatures walking their way through to discovering this hidden location of the Evil Queen's castle. Now, the fact that they are growing fruits and vegetables, and we elaborated on this a little bit beforehand, about 2 days ago, that they are stealing or taking this from the Happily Ever 1989 movie. You guys may remember that. It was basically made by 20th Century Studios. It was considered, quote-unquote, a direct sequel to Snow White that Disney had a lot of problems with. They even got into a lot of legal trouble with that. But moving ahead from all of this, given that the 7 magical creatures quite literally have powers in this film, it makes you wonder, what in the world is this movie trying to be? I know I keep saying this, but it really sounds like it's trying to be a mixture of Robin Hood, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, with, a taste of Snow White in the mix. It's very much trying way too hard to be original, trying way too hard to be different to the point where it's going to be very standoffish among many common moviegoers. That's just the honest truth here. So, moving to the next major piece about this. We know that Zegler's version of Snow White is quite insufferable in this film, just as much as Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character Helena Shaw, if not worse. Probably actually, yes, worse. Now, as the 7 magical creatures go into the Forbidden Forest, they begin to sing a song that is described to be an original theme by Disney, where the genre of music chosen is described to be nothing more than chanting to traditional Scottish instruments. There is even a creepy sequence where creatures begin to attack the 7 magical creatures as they try to run away and break free from animals like crows, and finally, one of the other scenes even involves Zegler's Snow White fighting the huntsman earlier in the film with the use of martial arts, like fighting against him, where she is holding the dagger against him in her hand. This connects to how Zegler did do some martial arts training, as it turns out, before she was filming for the first act of the film. So I don't know if you guys recall this, but she did do some action sequences in this movie, and it reminds me back to what she did with Fury of Gods, where she was training for that a little bit on and off. Nothing too crazy. But what's interesting about this is the fact that they are literally reversing the roles of Snow White and the huntsman that actually tracks her down. You guys may recall in the 37 original, the huntsman actually frightens Snow White, and then he feels this sense of dread, this sense of remorse, where he backs off, he admits the evil queen's plan with Snow White, and how she's interested in her, and how it wasn't really, something that he was all for. The roles are reversed. Basically now, Snow White is going to frighten the huntsman. And it just sounds like that this is all deliberate. It's 110% intentional, not just by Mark Webb, but also by the higher-ups over at Disney, and how this movie really is going to be Zegler-centric. Basically matching her insufferable attitude. That's going to be what the character is going to be like in this movie. And much like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, much like Amber Heard and Brie Larson, I always say this, and I want you guys to remember this. Their characters are very much like their personalities in real life. It's quite shockingly true when you compare their characters that they play and when you look at their personalities in the real world. So overall, Snow White 2024 is setting itself up for disaster. The fact that, number one, the 7 magical creatures have different powers. We talked about this, some of which have the ability to alter the weather, some of which have the ability to, like I said, grow fruits and vegetables in a natural environment, others of which can control specific aspects of the world elements. And we'll dive into that in a separate, sequence. But what's interesting about this is the fact that they are literally going out of their way to make Jonathan seem like a doormat in this film. Jonathan, by the way, is the supposed, if you want to even call him the love interest in this film, where he just gets backhanded compliments, he gets shied away, he gets, swept to the wayside, and that's basically what this movie is about. So, anyway guys, drop a comment below, fill me in below in the comments what you all have to say about this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
Nights alone.